Clear prop.
Star 73, Yankee number 2, following twin traffic, 3 mile final, clear Pleasantville. 1 Charlie Bravo, exit in runway 25, going 4 mile final.
This is Behind the Prop with United Flight Systems owner and licensed pilot Bobby Doss and his co-host, Major Airline Captain and designated pilot examiner Wally Mulhern. Now let's go Behind the Prop.
What's up, Wally?
Hey, Bobby. How are you?
Fantastic as always. This week we are going to do a show based on an article that we found in Flight Training Magazine, something we both really enjoy from the AOPA. If you're not a member, you should be a member of the AOPA, and Flight Training Magazine is one of the benefits. This is an article from the July 2018 magazine, and it's a really good article. It's something that, as a flight school owner, I try and teach these guys and girls how to be better instructors for students. And I talk about these 4 phases that instructors go through. When I'm hiring them, they're hungry, they just passed the check ride, they know everything that they think they need to know to be an instructor. And I always tell them, you're not ready, you're nowhere near ready. And there's this thing where we do some fundamentals of instruction, and we just don't. I think we're teaching people how to pass check rides, and we're not teaching people how to be great teachers of what they need to be teaching to make great pilots. And so there's this phase where I think most instructors probably get trumped or stumped on some of the things that they talk about in their first 250 hours of dual, right? Somebody knows from playing flight simulators or something, they know something that the instructor doesn't even know yet because they read an article about it. And the instructor's like, wow, that's interesting. I'll follow up on that. And then from 500 to maybe 1,000 hours, they probably aren't getting stumped anymore, and probably getting, maybe cocky is not the right word, but they're getting really sure of themselves. And they have this, I don't know, most of what I've seen is you need me more than I need you, maybe is the what's in my head. And right at that 1,000-hour mark, the statistics say that CFIs get to the most dangerous point of their career, right? They've been teaching, they probably have 750 hours dual. They probably can instruct with their eyes closed for the most part, and they really got to be diligent around that 1,000-hour mark. And then from 1,000 hours on, I think there's this short timers disease, right? They see the light at the end of the tunnel nowadays. They know they're going to get a job with the airlines, and they start thinking about that departure. And that departure becomes more important in most cases, unintentionally. This isn't something that's flight instructors. All flight instructors are trying to avoid these phases of being a flight instructor, but they get to this point where they think departing is really key, and it is because it's their career. But they got to take care of their students if they want to keep going. And while I warn every flight instructor, most say they won't become that way. They kind of have some twinge of that throughout their instructing career. While you see hundreds of instructors who have put candidates and applicants inside of your cell phone to do check rides for, do you feel that some of those phases are reality with flight instructors?
I definitely do. And what I see is I almost see, from my standpoint, I would break it down into 3 phases. The first phase that I see is a very hungry instructor communicating with me. They're here for the check ride to make sure all the endorsements are correct, and probably 50% of the time there's something missing, maybe an endorsement or something in the logbook of the applicant. It's easily fixable. The flight time was there. It was just maybe some maybe the night cross-country flight wasn't logged as cross-country or something like that, but it's stuff that's fixable. So you see that, and then the next phase of the flight instructor is there aren't any errors. Everything is in good shape. And then the next phase is sometimes the lazy phase. This is where the endorsements are maybe missing, and not so much the endorsements, but maybe the logbook entries within the logbook itself. And I try to tell the applicants that this is on them. This is their logbook. You see some logbooks where the remarks are blank, and I tell the applicant, you put something in there. Put something. If it's a solo flight and it's just you and you really don't, put in there what you did, or day VFR cross country, or go get a burger at airport XYZ, or
as a young student, I didn't know what I should write, though. I mean, I think there's this thought process that there's got to be regulation numbers. Without those regulation numbers, I'm not really writing the right things. But you're saying, hey, if you just flew to Conroe to eat lunch, flew to Conroe, ate lunch, came back to Hooks, right? I mean, that's okay.
Yeah. Had a burger at the restaurant. This is your logbook, and this is something that probably going to be passed on to your kids or your grandkids at some point. I've mentioned him in a previous episode. I mean, I look at my father's old logbooks. I have my father's World War II glider logbooks, and just to read that, it's chilling to read that. It's looking at the logbook entry for the Normandy invasion is probably a little bit more exciting than seeing where somebody went to eat lunch. But still, that's your logbook. So what does log mean? Log means to make a written record of something. So it's a written record. So use it appropriately.
Own it and make sure that the instructors are writing in it something that would be of value to you and highlighting what you did. Also, just one big regulation number probably doesn't cover that. But this article's all about, in the big red background with white text on it says peeved. I think it's something that students struggle with, and I don't think instructors really know it or believe it. And if you're a student that's struggling with this stuff, have a candid conversation with your instructor, or go see the guy who owns the flight school or the girl who owns the flight school. But the title of the article is 10 Things Instructors Do That Drive Students Crazy. And we're going to talk about them all a little bit today. So, number one, flight instructors say this, and they shouldn't say this, but they do it, and they mean it probably more than they should too. I cannot wait until I get my hours and leave for the airlines. I hate teaching. How's that going to make a student feel?
That's going to be horrible. Imagine going into the hospital for heart surgery, and as you're being prepped before they put the really good stuff into you to put you out, you hear the doctor say, "Man, I can't wait to get out of this place. I want to work somewhere else. I want a different type job." I'd like to think you'd jump off the table and say, "Hey, give me another surgeon."
Exactly.
Same way with your flight instructor, and to the flight instructors who have that attitude, that you probably ought to leave now. But it's, golly, you don't want your student looks up to you.
So much so.
Yeah, I remember my first flight instructor. Man, he hung the moon. And whatever he said, yeah, okay, buy this, okay, don't do this, okay, yeah, I'll do whatever I need to do, because boy, he had a skill that I was trying to achieve, and I looked at, boy, he probably had 300 hours. I had no hours.
Yep.
And so that they do look up to you.
Well, it's also, you're spending a lot of money for that instructor, and that instructor is getting paid, and the airplanes is a lot. To downplay it as not that important to the student is really, really, really a shame. So if you're a flight instructor, don't do that. Make it seem as important as that 2, 4, 6 hour student, and make them feel really special. They might have leaned their entire home and everything they own to be able to do this. So make it feel that special to them.
And I tell my applicants, I say, look, I know today is a big day for you. And I tell them, I said, I'm actually honored to be a part of this big day for you. A very small part. I mean, I'm just making the call. You did all the work. But just for a student to come out to the airport and take a lesson, it's probably the highlight of their day.
No question. Yeah. I think sometimes we take it for granted that we just fly airplanes around the city and do what we want to do in them. Number 2, assuming students understand the jargon of flying. This is one of my pet peeves. When I see it, I address it. I come from a technology background, and if anyone knows anything about tech, the acronyms are plentiful in technology. And when I was in tech and people would use all the acronyms or the short slangs around people that didn't understand it, primarily customers, I would always talk about how bad that was for the customer because they don't understand what we're saying. Likewise, in aviation, a lot of people may not know the difference between the trim and the horizontal stabilizer because it's kind of back there all together. And if you point back there and you say them both, they might not know what those are. You've got to find a way to make sure that the student's understanding your jargon. You might say Roger, they might say affirmative. You don't correct them. You need to make sure you're helping them become a better student. And if you're a student and you're not getting some of that feedback, there are things you can go research and learn, but ask for help for sure.
Third thing on the list is loud, often explicitive-laden, unexpected explanations during flight training. There's no place for that in any kind of a professional setting. I mean, I keep going back to a doctor. Boy, if I went into a doctor and he came in and just started using inappropriate language, I think I would just get up and leave. It might be effective for some students, but I would say the 90% of the people are going to be turned off, or they're going to turn off their listening mindset when you start doing that. So there's just no place for it, and you got to have respect for your audience, and that's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, the other part of that is that we've had a few people ask questions or write in and tell us of a significant scenario where they're scared. And we both believe it's probably because the instructor was also scared or afraid or timid. And that's real. I mean, this is real. We are in a risky business. There is risk all day, every day in what we do. And I think a lot of times that does come out of the CFI and blend into the student. The calmer the CFI is, the calmer the student will be for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Number 4 on the list is not understanding, and this is the student speaking, but not understanding we have lives outside of flying. Again, the majority of your students, they've got, there's other things going on in their lives. If, they may be older, they may have kids, they may have a family, may have a job, school going on. Very few people are just here for nothing but flight training, where their whole life revolves around flight training. So you got to understand that. There are going to be times where maybe your student has to cancel because of a life event. I tell my applicants in check rides, I say, look, leave your cell phone on. If you need to stop and answer a text, I get it. Life goes on, and there's more important things than what we're doing right here. What we're doing is pretty important, but if you've got a family issue or a work issue and you need to take 5 minutes, we can accommodate that. So, understand that.
Yeah, there's a country song out right now I really like a lot that talks about you can only give a rain check to your parents or your friends for so long until you can't give one anymore. And it talks about picking up the phone when your mom calls and all those things, because you really will want to do that one day for sure, right? So life is much more important than some of the things we're doing on a daily basis. And I think flight instructors that are in a hurry maybe to get out of here and move on in their career push a similar mindset on students that maybe doesn't map equally across the board. I knew a CFI who once said, I make him have a commercial mindset from day one. Well, not everyone has a commercial mindset day 2 even. So you can't set those expectations if that's not the expectations. Sad story this weekend, I was out to dinner and I saw an ex-student that I hadn't seen in a long time. And I was like, I was going to reach out to you and see what was going on, why you weren't training anymore. And unfortunately, she lost her husband to COVID and has just really been in a slump. And, you think back to somebody that I saw every day training, and I was kind of wondering where they had gone. That's kind of a lot more important than training, right? And it's shocking that that life does happen, and sometimes it's really bad, and we got to keep that in mind for all of us.
Yeah, with all my applicants, I'll spend about 5 to 8 minutes or so just getting to know them a little bit. And a lot of times I'll start the conversation with, why are you here? Why are you trying to get your private pilot certificate? And if they say, well, I want to do this for a living, I'll say, okay, if you could write your own script, where will you be in 2 years? Some of them, want to be flight instructors. Some of them have other aspirations. And so I just, where's their mindset? Some people want to get their private pilot certificate, and that's their goal.
Yeah, I think when you gave me my instrument check ride, my dream, my long, big dream was just to be able to fly my wife to the casinos if the clouds were 2,000 feet.
Yeah.
I had no other expectation than doing much more with being a pilot than that. Like that was the end goal. And here we sit today. Things have changed drastically. So I would have never, it would have never been good for me for someone to take that commercial approach early on with me and hold me to standards that weren't really fun flying. I would have been turned off and probably walked away.
Yeah.
Number 5 on the list is lack of preparation. And unfortunately, I relate to this one a lot. I was not a very good student. I can say that Justin Meeks, if you're out there, I know I let you down on dozens of occasions. We would do a ground lesson on a rainy day about airspace, and he would send me home to do some reading and homework, and I would go home and I wouldn't do the reading and I wouldn't do the homework, and I'd come back to the next lesson and it would be raining, and he would say, "What do you want to do?" And I would say, "I would like you to teach me airspace one more time." And he would just roll his eyes. I'm sure he just finished teaching it to another student, and we would do it again. And I would take scrupulous notes, and I would promise I was going to go home and do the studying. And that just wasn't exciting to me, man. I just did not like the book work, and it took me a long time to mature in my aviation tenure and buckle down and do the homework stuff. But I don't know that we shouldn't let students off the hook. But if they don't do it exactly the way we would do it, that's probably my style. I would want you to do it the way I do things, and that's not okay. We need to let them have their style and their approach, but we do need to hold them accountable. And I knew I was being held accountable every time I just didn't do the work.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to come in and get browbeat, that's for sure. I didn't want to come in and him say, "Oh, well, you suck and I'm not going to help you." He sucked it up every time, and he probably taught me airspace no less than 6 times.
Yeah, and the other side of that is lack of preparation from the instructor standpoint. I mean, I've seen it sitting around flight schools. The student walks in, and the instructor says, "Okay, what are we doing today?"
I hate that.
Well, the instructor ought to be driving the ship. The instructor ought to have a pretty good idea, and even if it means, let me take a look at your logbook and refreshing the memory and going, "Oh yeah, okay, yeah, we need to go do some more stalls," or whatever.
Yep. If your school doesn't use a syllabus, ask them to use a syllabus. If they don't keep good notes, ask them to keep good notes. Your instructor probably does have 10 to 12 students if you're going to a fairly large school, and that might be difficult, but they are being compensated. They should prepare the night before, come up with an action plan, have that action plan, and you should come prepared as well. Even if you are named Bobby, you should come in prepared. Number 6, poor communications and directions. We all know, well, maybe we don't all know, but I can assure you the cockpit in a plane that is running is the most expensive and worst classroom in the world. And it's not the best place to communicate. So make sure you have a plan. Make sure you know what you're trying to do and what the goals are. Some of that comes from the previous one about preparation, but you need to take the time to have a good pre-flight conversation. It will save you a small fortune during your flight training, and have a good post-flight conversation because it will do the same thing for you. Wally, you guys have a pre and post flight conversation before every major airline flight you fly, I'm assuming, and you probably have done the same flight with the same crew many, many times, but you still have a pre-flight and a post-flight conversation.
Yeah. It's required that we brief, and it's required that we debrief every flight, and sometimes the debrief is very simple. But we do say, we do ask the question, what could we have done better?
That's important. And I think sometimes I didn't want to look like I didn't know what my instructor was talking about, so I might have agreed with him. That's a slippery slope, right? You don't want to agree that you understand something if you don't, and you got to be careful about how you address some of that stuff, but have an open conversation with your instructor and make sure you guys are communicating well.
Right. Number 7 is lack of teaching ability. This is tough because you would think by the time someone has passed a CFI check ride and instructed some that they would have developed an ability to teach. I think this all goes back to communication skills. So this actually kind of goes back to the one we just talked about. Usually better communicators are better teachers. And when I say communicator, I think one of the greatest assets an instructor can have is the ability to listen to the student and figure out what the student needs, where the student is lacking, maybe just something that the student is not understanding. And you've got to, the instructor has to make the student feel like it's okay to ask a question. I can remember doing initial operating experience with a brand new pilot at my airline, and at the time we hadn't done a whole lot of new hire training, and so this was the first new hire I had in several years, and we got to the flight deck, and I just hopped in my seat and was expecting him to hop in the seat, and he said to me, "Where do I put my suitcase?" And I thought, wow, what a great question, but a very basic question. I didn't even think to show him where we put the suitcases and how we tie them down. But I mean, boy, that kind of slapped me in the face. I went, wow, I am dealing with a real new hire. He doesn't understand the ins and outs of all this, and so it was good for me, very good for me.
Normally, when I'm interviewing and bring on new CFIs, I always have them teach me a ground lesson of some sort, and it's interesting. They go right into teaching it like they probably did on their check ride, but they fail to do some of the fundamentals of instruction items that we've all learned. But I think once we pass that written, we kind of move quickly away from that. Other than having a lesson plan, but that it's very, very rare when someone explains the goal of the lesson, what completion standards would look like, what I should be able to understand at the end of the lesson, and then teach me that lesson and then wrap the lesson with, do I understand those things we said we were going to learn? And if you're not a great teacher, the best thing you could do is really follow some of the fundamentals of instruction and a lesson plan, because it's going to at least guide the meeting and conversation much better. I think we find ourselves as CFIs somewhere early to mid time in our training life getting a little complacent on some of the rules and just trying to check the boxes off that need to be taught and the maneuvers off that need to be taught, and not putting the big wrapper and bow on it for the flight student who doesn't do it 8 times a day. And they need a little bit of that guidance and help. That would make, if you're struggling teaching, that would help a lot for sure.
Yeah, and you have to constantly have feedback from your student, whether it's verbal or it's just you're just looking at them, because there are times when we've all had conversations with people, and you're explaining something to somebody, you're telling somebody something, and you look at that person and you go, man, he or she is zoned out. They're not even listening to me. You've got to be able to pick that up with your student, because just giving the giving the short field takeoff speech isn't good enough. You've got to make sure the short field takeoff speech was actually received. Quarterback throws the ball, he's got to make sure the receiver catches the ball.
Yep, no question.
Number 8 is canceling training because of another job.
Man, that's happened here, and it makes me mad. Somebody gets called so they can fly in a King Air for the day, and they take 8 students off the calendar and go fly King Air.
Yeah.
Unacceptable in my book. And a CFI will hear it. I get it's important and big time that they should go. They want to go build, but you can't dump 8 students and go do that. That's not fair. I don't care if it's a CJ4. You can't cancel on 4 students. Again, you just took 8 highlights of the day and gave them away for your one highlight of the day. And it's just, it's too selfish.
Yeah.
Those opportunities are going to come in the future. And if it's not your day off, I'm a big believer you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
The other thing, I had a country western singer that was here for a long time, and I always kept telling me he was going to quit. And Sean, I know you've made a big aviation career for yourself. I'm proud of you, but he would cancel for a gig. He'd get called to do a show, and he would cancel on 3 or 4 students on a Friday afternoon to go do that show, and it was painful for those students, and you just shouldn't do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Number 9, not keeping notes about a student's flight training. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but it is critical that you follow a syllabus, use a syllabus, make the student be responsible for some of what's coming, but you as an instructor also take notes, know what they need to repeat, if anything. That's syllabi, in my opinion, and we have it electronically here so all CFIs can see it and all administrators can see it. But they should be able to hand that syllabus to someone and that person know exactly where they're at. One of the biggest complaints for flight students that I hear is that early on, before we use the syllabus as religious as we do today, was I don't want to have to refly anything. I feel like I'm having to refly with this other instructor that, Tom went to the airlines and now I'm working with Bob and Bob wants me to refly stalls. I've done that proficiently with 2 other instructors. Why do I have to do it again? That's painful. It's expensive. And flight instructors, flight schools, independent or not, you guys should be doing better to help it be easier on a student for sure.
And number 10 is not celebrating the achievements. And I can give a personal story on this. December 7th, 1981, I soloed for the first time. And I just remember coming in and tying the airplane down and walking in, and my instructor said, "All right, congratulations. Let me see your logbook." And that was the end of it. And I remember driving away thinking, wow, okay, I guess it's not a big deal. I kind of thought it was a big deal, but I guess it's not, because that's the only time that the only time I had seen a solo was my solo. I didn't know what to expect. I became a CFI and I ended up working at a different flight school, and all of a sudden solos were a big deal. I mean, we cut the shirt tail, we wrote on it, and this is before pictures and social media and all that, so there wasn't a lot of that going on. But it was a big deal. It was a big deal at that flight school, and you just see the student light up, celebrate it. Man, life's too short. So these are big achievements for someone.
Yeah, I don't have my instrument picture. I don't know why I never took one, but I didn't take one, and it still makes me mad every time I give a tour. All our employee pictures are on the wall, and I don't have my instrument. I have solo and private and commercial and multi-engine. I probably should just go stand out there. I look bigger and older than I did back then, but it is a big deal. And I think not just the major milestones, getting back in the right seat, someone coming in for a flight review that hasn't flown in 10 years, celebrate that with them. It's a big deal to them. The fact that you've already flown 4 times that day might make it seem like not a big deal, but that's a big deal. Someone who's struggled with a landing, who greases 3 landings and gets that much closer to soloing. The person that struggled with cross-country planning, and they did the best cross-country plan you've seen in a while. The person that just couldn't figure out weight and balance gets weight and balance all of a sudden. All these light bulbs that go off, they should be celebrated in some way, and it doesn't have to be huge. It's just like in the front of the flight school, tell the dispatcher or whoever's working up front, they got it today. And you'd be surprised how much momentum that creates for student pilots who need that little bit of a pat on the back or promotion to keep going and fight the good fight to fly another day.
Yeah, and just to tag on that a little bit, it was about a year ago, I bought a new car. And I found it funny that at the car dealership, you got to talk to about 8 different people, your salesman, the sales manager. They want you to talk to the aftermarket guy, the service guy. And so you're talking to all these people, and everybody kept congratulating me. And I had to laugh. That they're I'm just buying a car. I just gave you a whole bunch of money.
Yep.
For a car.
You should be congratulating them.
But they're not. Yeah, they're congratulating me, and I'm thinking you should. There's nothing. I didn't do anything here. But in this case, with a student, hitting a milestone, a solo cross country, certainly getting their pilot certificates. And as you're flying along, when you hit 100 hours, 200 hours, 250, 500, the big one, 1,000, and of course 1,500, celebrate that.
No doubt. Well, hopefully you enjoyed the episode. If you're an instructor, do better. If you're a student, do better. Work together to make your flight training the best that it can possibly be. As always, fly safe and stay behind the prop.
Thanks for checking out the Behind the Prop podcast. Be sure to click subscribe and check us out online at BehindTheProp.com. Behind the Prop is recorded in Houston, Texas. Creator and host is Bobby Doss. Co-host is Wally Mulhern. The show is for entertainment purposes only and is not meant to replace actual flight instruction. Thanks for listening, and remember, fly safe.